back. You're listening to Get Real with Bob and Stacey. You're joining us for our Leaders and Legends segment. On the phone with us today is Libby Gill, executive coach and best-selling author of The Hope-Driven Leader. Welcome to the show, Libby.
Thank you.
So I want to give everybody some background on Libby. She is the former head of communications and public relations for Sony, Universal, and Turner Broadcasting. She was also the branding brain behind the launch of the Dr. Phil Show. Libby is now CEO of LA-based Libby Gill and Company, an executive coaching and consulting firm. She guides emerging and established leaders at organizations including ADP, Capital One, CBRE, Disney, Intel, Microsoft, and many more to inspire purpose and ignite performance. She's the author of 5 books, including the award-winning You Unstuck and Capture the Mind Share, and the Market Share Will Follow. Libby has shared her success strategies on CNN, NPR, The Today Show, and in Business Week Time, The New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and many more. Her latest book, The Hope-Driven Leader, Harness the Power of Positivity, just recently came out. So welcome, Libby. Tell us more about The Hope-Driven Leader.
Well, it's interesting. In my first career leading communications, I always loved turning I tended to have the biggest, youngest, greenest team, and turning them into executives was a real part of it that I loved. And later, when I felt like, okay, I've launched as many TV shows as I can, I'm going to start doing the same thing, but as an executive coach. And I saw that so many people in the workplace were so overwhelmed or stressed, and I had experienced that myself. So I really felt like hope was a missing ingredient. And then the more I started doing research and homework on hope, I discovered that there is, just like with happiness, there's a body of science specific to hopefulness, and it comes out of medicine and positive psychology. And I just took some of the principles and transferred them over to the business world.
Interesting. So why do you think hope is so important right now?
We're living in a tough world, and, it doesn't help that we've got that 24/7 news cycle pointing at it and drilling down on it at all times. So I think you can lose pretty much everything in this life. You can lose health and money, and it's nice to get those things back, but you certainly cannot lose hope. That's what keeps us all motivated to put our feet on the floor in the morning and get into the office and do what we do. And to me, it's really the jet fuel for both work and life.
Okay, so you said a few minutes ago that there is like a science behind hopefulness. Explain that some.
It's called hope theory, and it started with a fellow who was a positive psychologist, a professor at the University of Kansas, and he was on his sabbatical, and he thought, well, I'm going to do a little studying up on hope, and obviously hope's been written about in poems and novels and religious literature and all of that for many years, but he was surprised to discover there were no books, no academic or scientific books on hope, and he realized it was because it had just not been measured, and scientists tend to discount anything that's not measurable. So he created what he called, the fancy term is the Adult Dispositional Hope Scale, and it's really a simple questionnaire to find out what your level of hope is. And I had the good fortune to recreate it in my book, The Hope-Driven Leader, and also add some other things that will help people really link beliefs to behaviors. That's what hope theory is all about.
And what's very interesting, I think there's a quote out there that says hope is not a strategy, and you say hope is a strategy. Explain that.
Yeah, well, my thought is, and I do hear that all the time, is if you try to give strategies or resources or tools or anything, learning methods to people who are feeling utterly hopeless, it doesn't go very far. It just doesn't sink in. So instead, first inject that sense of positiveness, of hopefulness. And hope, according to hope theory, hope is also about having a crystal clear vision of the future, but setting the bar high enough that here's my vision. I know exactly where I want to go, but I also recognize that it comes with pitfalls and setbacks, and that is just part of the process. So that's the difference between what the hope theorists call true hope versus false hope. So it's really about seeing where you want to go, believing that change is possible, and knowing that it's only the actions of the individual that drive the outcome. You can't really count on your boss, your spouse, the government. It's really up to you to drive your future.
And is there a difference between hope and just being optimistic?
Yeah, there is. By definition, optimism is it's a good thing. You know, it's kind of the half full versus the half empty, but it is a sense everything's going to turn out all right, it's all going to be fine, but it is not linked to action, where hope is specific and situational and future focused. It says, if I envision this and I do this, then this is going to be the outcome. So it's really linking your belief to your behavior and continuing to move forward.
You also say that hope is one of the most overlooked elements of leadership and corporate culture. Explain more on that.
Well, you know, Stacey, it's what we're talking about. It's that people believe that hope is not a plan, hope is not a strategy. They think hope is something sort of squishy or abstract or, you know, pie in the sky, but it's not. It is specific to saying, here's where I'm headed. And I've got my eyes open. I see what the obstacles could be, but I care so much about it. I'm so passionate about this outcome that I'm going to keep moving towards it anyway. So that's really what that sort of, it feeds us that sort of grit or perseverance.
So what are some of the skills that you cover in your book, The Hope-Driven Leader?
Well, I cover a lot of the things that I cover as an executive coach in Fortune 500 companies. One is, and I know your folks deal with this, is just the massive change. We are dealing with change that's so rapid, that's so complex. I mean, think about it this way: is as fast as the world is changing today, this may actually be the slowest rate of change we'll ever experience again. And when you think that, it's kind of mind-blowing. So I give people ways to manage the process of change. Also, some great research and data about how to lead your teams, how to really connect with teams so that they are working together at a high level of communication and collaboration. And it was interesting, some of the research I found was that it's not just about what you share in a team meeting, for example, but it's how you share. It's how you communicate with each other, with a deep level of engagement, a kind of an energy that is among everybody on the team. It's not just your leader droning on and people nodding their heads, but it's about equal distribution. And also a key ingredient is exploration, that people go outside their day-to-day world, see what else is out there, whether that means going to a conference or meeting with somebody across town or just learning something new that they can add to their sort of their skill set in their business.
So one of the things you touched on at the very beginning of this, and maybe it was in the bio, it was like developing the future leaders in an organization. Is there anything that we can look for in the up-and-coming potential leaders in our company as far as their hopefulness or optimism?
And yes, and you're right. I have a chapter in the book called The Gen Blend, which is about generational perspectives, because we have in the workplace, depending on how you count them, anywhere from 4 to 6 different generations side by side. And people love to give millennials kind of a tough rap. They're so entitled, they're so this, they're that, which, you know, maybe there's a kernel of truth to that. But I think if we really look at people as individuals, not all millennials are tech geniuses, even though they pretty much all grew up with technology, but everybody's got their own passion and their own skill set. And as leaders, we've got to take time to connect with them where they are, not just expect them to act like boomers or the even older traditionalists. We've got to really embrace this. By 2020, we're going to be outnumbered. Millennials will be about 60% of the workforce, and they'll be managing other people. So it's a matter of getting on their wavelength and understanding what they care about. And one thing that I see, and I'm the proud mom of 2 millennials of my own, both graduating in May, yay! But is that they have a deep sense of purpose, that they want to be connected to companies where they get, even if they're the entry-level kid, that they get, that they are doing something that's bigger than themselves, and they see what the company's contributions and value are. And as leaders, sometimes we have to connect the dots for people so that, if they're in the office working away, they've got to see that their partners, their leaders are out in the field, closing deals. And so if they see that and they see that there's a path, I could be like Stacy, or I could do what Bob's doing, and not tomorrow necessarily, but with training and hard work, then I think we've got a really powerful workforce. In fact, the research shows us that they are not only the most educated, but the most hopeful generation to come along in a while. They think it's up to them to change the world, and it may be.
So I have a question for you about preparing for the future. So we're in the real estate business, and I have about 400 plus real estate agents throughout New England. The market's as hot as it's ever been. It's crazy busy.
Yay.
The one thing I know from being in the business for 20 years is it'll be great for a while, but eventually it's going to crash.
Right.
So what can I do as a leader now to prepare people for the fact that, hey, it's kind of awesome now, but number two, know that it's like that's all seems kind of like it's the opposite of hopefulness, because I try to prepare people and say, it's not going to be like this forever, so be prepared, it will crash. Is that bad? Or should? Yeah.
No, I think you're being realistic. You've got your eyes open. You're sharing the truth. I think that's always a good thing. And to maybe put that hopeful spin of, this is a time you really want to work hard. You really want to focus on the business, because it won't be this hot forever. It's just the nature of the business. It's cyclical. It'll go back. It'll come back and be hot again, but you need to be prepared that it's up and down, and that is what we do, and that's what you've signed on for. And isn't it great while it's this hot, and we'll be fine when it's not. So it's really letting people know, if they don't see it already, or they're bracing for the worst news, is, hey, enjoy it while it's here, because you've got to be in it for the long haul, and understand that you've got to weather the slow times.
And when it does crash, which I hate to say when I'm on the phone with the hope-driven leadership expert, but when it does crash, what can I do to infuse hope into the team when things are bad?
Well, communication is a huge part of it, is to let people know we're in this together. I'm here for you. I'm going to guide you through this. We're going to get through together, and share your wisdom that you and Bob have built over the last 20 plus years, that you know what's around the corner, that you know what's going to happen. I mean, to some degree, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but that you've been through the ups and downs of this, and letting people know we're going to write it out. That's the nature. You knew it was coming. It's here. And when you're truthful with people and you say, look, we think it's going to be this way for about 6 months, or we may have a tough year ahead of us, but it's okay, we'll come out the other side. Not to give them any false hope or to, tell them things that aren't true, but to say, hey, we're still standing. We've been around for a long time, and we're not going anywhere. So you really give people that sense of, you're not denying the reality, but you're looking at the positive side of it.
And then I had a question about one of your previous books was You Unstuck. So let's just say somebody does feel stuck. It seems like hope is one of the biggest ways to get yourself unstuck.
I think so. And because it's so specific about that future vision. And I will often advise the people I work with, that I coach and speak to, that, companies have to have their 5-year, their 10, or even their 20-year plan. As human beings and individuals, it's a little hard to wrap your head around, 20 years where I'm going to be. Not that you shouldn't have your retirement or your, those sort of things in your head, but set a vision for a year from now. What are you going to do? And it may not be that anybody's begging you for it. It may not be urgent, like getting out, with your clients immediately, answering the phone, closing deals, but what can you do in terms of your own growth, your training, something you can do in the workplace to really move the level up, to really change your game, and give yourself a year to do it? If you could accomplish it in a week or a month, you haven't set the bar really high. And if you say, well, I'm going to do this sometime in the next 10 years, there's no sense of urgency. But I tend to add one element to my business every year. This year it was writing a book, getting a book out into the world on something that I speak on and that I care about. So when you bring it down to scale so you can wrap your head around it, it's not so hard to visualize the future and move towards it.
For anybody just tuning in, we have with us Libby Gill, and she is the author of The Hope-Driven Leader, Harness the Power of Positivity at Work. Libby, where is the best place for people to pick up a copy of the book?
Well, you can go right to Amazon and get the hard book or the Kindle version, or go to my website at libbygill.com and download the first chapter. Check it out, and you can order it right there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Libby.
Oh, thank you for having
Thanks,
me. Thank you.
That's all for this edition of Get Real. Make sure you join us again next weekend for more.